I'm Hillary Hendershot, your host, and this is Profit Boss Radio, episode 121. Profit Boss Radio is your weekly wealth mastermind. Profit Boss is also a community and a movement for women who are ready to take control of their money, break the glass ceiling, and give ourselves permission to finally have enough. Want the secrets of wealth to be yours? This is the place. I'm Hillary Hendershot. I'm a certified financial planner running a leading advisory firm for women, and I'm sharing with you real stories from real life and real women who are making it happen. Forget Wall Street. Let's do this, ladies. Hello, Profit Boss. Thanks for showing up. Today's episode is unique because it's actually a replay of a show I was featured on earlier this year. As many of you know, my family and I are fairly consumed with our daughter's health issues. That's really caused me to readjust my schedule so that I can be with Harlan as she receives treatments. So what's really been such a blessing is the outpouring of support and love that we've received. And that includes support from you, Profit Boss. This show I have permission to re-air to my loyal listeners is from the wildly successful, maybe you've heard of it, Don't Keep Your Day Job podcast by the remarkable Cathy Heller. A little bit about Cathy, you should know. She started out as a singer-songwriter and first found success licensing her music to TV, film, and ads. She quickly became a standout in her field and was featured in magazines like Billboard, Variety, and the LA Weekly. After making a multi-six-figure living with her music, Cathy started a music agency and then began teaching other artists to grow their careers. I think you're going to love her perspective on money and how to look at how to make money and how to make more money. 2 weeks after her third daughter was born, she started her top-ranked podcast that she was so gracious to invite me on. Cathy's show has been featured in the Huffington Post, the New York Times, and Inc. magazine's top 9 podcasts. Her podcast is a fire hose of inspiration and offers a reminder to us all to stop selling ourselves short. And that really is the message I want you to hear from this episode. Each week, Cathy has honest conversations with successful creative entrepreneurs about the hands-on, practical steps to build a life you love and use your zone of genius to make the world a better place. I'm so grateful for Cathy and her willingness to share her show with Profit Boss listeners. So without further delay, sit back and enjoy today's episode and find out how you can change your relationship and habits with money. We dive into the ways you can build wealth and also how to overcome any of those pesky limiting beliefs that can stand between you and your full wealth potential.
Our guest today is Hillary Hendershot. Hillary is a financial planner. She is a dynamo. She has her own podcast called Profit Boss Radio. She's done a TED Talk. Her whole thing is about helping you remove any kind of blocks around money and helping people to really be financially independent and successful. And she's really breaking ground on her show, Profit Boss Radio. Every single week, she's having frank conversations with women who have been able to succeed. And despite whatever circumstances might have been in their way, they just figure out how to get around those hurdles. And her TED Talk had a lot to do with the language that we use around money and how that actually affects the way we treat money, the way we think about it. And I think this is so critical because I do feel like money is such a burdened kind of a word. And I feel like people have a lot of baggage around it. I have literally sat down with people who have tears in their eyes when I actually ask them, why is it so hard for them to consider being paid for what they love or to consider charging more, let's say, for whatever it is. And there's just something tied to our self-worth, and there's also something tied to whatever was modeled for us. And so in some of our homes growing up, money was something that really caused a lot of pain and stress. And we were told that money was like the root of all evil. And money was, if people had money, maybe that made them less, kind. And there's just a lot of baggage around it. And we need to really look at that under a microscope, because if we want to have financial independence and we want to be able to create more freedom in our lives to do the things that we love, then money is a necessity, and we have to we have to make friends with that, and we have to learn how to receive it and how to not have any qualms about that. And so I'm excited to have Hillary here today. I'm excited to dive in and talk to her and hear what she has to say. She's got a ton of wisdom and she has so much passion and enthusiasm. You're going to love her. So without further ado, let's bring her on.
Hi, Hillary. Thank you so much for being here today.
I'm excited, Cathy. Thanks for having me.
No, this is going to be super fun. So I love my audience, and I know that they're going to get a kick out of this because we've talked about lots of different things. You know, we've talked about strategy, we've talked about mindset. We haven't actually talked a lot about money. I mentioned once a few episodes back about sort of the hurdle in terms of money mindset and how sometimes people actually they don't realize it, but they're sort of anti-money. The thing is, though, we really shouldn't be anti-money because money is an absolute need if we want to have the freedom to do what we want to do with our time. So I'm excited to talk to you, and you have your own show called Profit Boss, and you have a lot that you can tell us since you're also been in this world helping people advise them with their finances for a while. So I have a lot of stuff I want to ask you, but first I want you to just tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your own story.
Sure. So I got started in the field of financial planning in my early 20s. My father was a fiduciary financial advisor. But honestly, Cathy, I was really bored by it. I thought all the financial advisors I met were sort of shoulder to shoulder with my father. They were, frankly, old white men, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with being an old white man. I just didn't relate to them. And
you're not old, you're not a man.
Exactly. And they all had so much gravitas, right? And it produced a lot of insecurity in me. I'm thinking, who would ever do business with me when they can do business with them? Kind of fast forward a few years, and I actually, interestingly, even though I have a degree in economics and I was a certified financial planner, kind of found myself in this position where I really wasn't getting ahead financially from my own personal financial perspective. In fact, I was a major overspender. I had tens of thousands of dollars of credit card debt. And during the financial crisis, things really came to a head for me to the point where I actually lost a condo. I owned a piece of real estate. I paid $400,000 for a one-bedroom condo in San Jose. And in about a year, that condo was worth $200,000, which is a terrible position to be in if you have more mortgage than house.
Yeah, good.
And so I kind of had to wipe the financial slate clean for myself, and I had to really come clean publicly. I had to, I just said to myself, look, whatever I'm doing, I'm going to start doing the opposite of it because I'm done with the misery and suffering. And it's very emotional to not have enough money and to make that mean that there's something wrong with you, that you're not a valuable part of society, right? And those are the things that were going through my head. And so I just said, I'm done with this. I'm going to figure this money thing out. And if I can figure this out for myself, I bet I can help other people. I bet there are other people out there who have money troubles of their own. And I'm not only speaking to overspenders, right? There's lots of different destructive money mindsets. You just mentioned one of them, that money is bad. If you think money is bad, you're going to struggle with money your whole life. Yeah. So I was able to pay off the debt,
How did you turn it all around?
So what I discovered is that we all have some strongly held beliefs about money. And there are a lot of money coaches and teachers who talk about money blocks. And when they talk about them, sometimes I feel like they describe them as sort of a minefield. So you have a money block. It might be in random places in your life or in your mind or in your financial life. But I actually believe that you have a formative belief about money. I trademarked a term called your money operating system. So you have an operating system for money, the same way the computer has an operating system. And that all of your other money blocks ensue from that one core money belief. In my opinion, one of the most popular money operating systems is there's never enough money. Now, interestingly, and this is where it starts getting a little complex, is if you believe there's never enough money, you'll either be an under earner or an overspender. So a lot of people have high income, six figures, $200,000 a year, but they spend it all and they can't figure out why. And it's because if you believe there's never enough money, you have got to get money out of your ecosystem. You have to get it out of your bank accounts so that you will experience there not being enough money.
That is crazy.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
And that's what I was doing when I had over $100,000 of income back in the day. And I always spent like 110. I mean, it was crazy.
Okay, so in your early 30s when that happened. And that everything that you said, which I want to just pause for a second and comment on, because you said things about how it made you feel like you weren't a valuable member of society. You weren't, it was such a humiliating experience. And that is how people feel. Like, no one wants to talk about this stuff because we want to, I know how I am. I just want to sort of earn as much as I can, do as much as I can, but I don't actually ever want to make a budget or look what's in the bank account or sort of balance things. It just makes me really uncomfortable and stressed out.
Yeah.
But these are thoughts that people have when those things happen, and no one would want to talk about it. But when we sort of put things out there and we stop having shame around it, then we can actually address the situation and we can correct things and we can take charge of things.
Yeah.
But everything you're saying has to be brought into the light so that we can take more of a powerful position. So how did you correct that? And then we're going to get into all the stuff that you know now and how you can teach us how to do it too. But how did you wind up correcting that?
So what worked for me was a combination of mindset reset and a dramatic alteration in how I actually interacted with money. So in the beginning, and this is the way for people when they have to turn things around, I had to tighten the belt so much that it almost hurt, right? I mean, I put myself on a very, very strict spending plan. And I created a system of multiple accounts so that I had one checking account with one debit card attached to it. I cut up all the credit cards, went away, right? I did not allow myself to touch a credit card for years. And I have an 800 FICO score now. I just got a $1.2 million mortgage, and I've got maybe 5 credit cards in my wallet. So at this point, things have shifted. But at that time, I maybe put $750 or something into a checking account every 2 weeks. And that was, if I was going to spend money, that was the account that it came from. And that was the way I figured out how to know, because I had to get, I had to pay the credit cards off. I then had to start saving, money for my future. I needed to save for my next car. By the way, that's a huge mistake that some people make, is they don't save for the next car and then they need a new car and it's an emergency. Now I have to take out debt.
Right.
So I started saving $500 a month for my next car. And if I was in a restaurant or buying clothes or buying coffee or going to the movies, the money came out of that one checking account. I call that today's fun. I literally name my checking accounts: yesterday's promises, today's fun, and tomorrow's dreams. Isn't that silly?
No,
but it totally works.
It makes sense to you. Yeah. This is what you could spend today. This is for tomorrow. And this is for yesterday. Okay.
Exactly. So I put myself on that kind of plan, figured out what my overhead was. That goes into yesterday's promises, and then just made today's fun work. And, there were weeks where, if I spent $400 or $500 in the first week, well, now I don't have much money left for the next week. And I have to make it work. I just have to get through until the next payday. Right. And so there were times, I literally asked people to buy me lunch sometimes, or I would eat canned food. And I know that sounds bad and low quality of life, but my goodness, I was making it work financially and I had to figure it out. And, I didn't lose weight, or I wasn't, malnutrition. I was fine. I was just figuring it out. And I had to start to surround myself with people who were financially successful. And I needed to reset this belief that there was never enough money. I started creating income goals for myself. And when you tighten the belt and you leave money in your bank accounts, for people who think there's never enough money, when you go into your bank account, you log in and there's more money than you thought there was going to be. It's like this huge cognitive dissonance, right? Because you're used to that being an event that causes suffering, stomach aches, right? Avoidance. Yeah. But when I think there's going to be $2,000 in the account and I open it up and there's $3,000, it's like, whoa, sometimes there is enough money, Cathy.
Yeah.
And so mindset shifts are not just conceptual. You have the opportunity in the world to create environments that conflict with your strongly held limiting beliefs. And then when, your mind can't hold conflicting information for very long, right? You believe there's never enough money, but there's more money than you thought there was going to be in your bank account, and you don't spend it. That starts to really shift what you already think and believe.
Yeah, that's powerful.
I think so.
Yeah. So what happened? So how many months of this went by, or a year of this? How long till you were really righting the ship and you were on the other side?
So I got myself back up to, like $150,000 of income. I started renting a place, and I remember little milestones like paying cash for my next car. That was huge. I remember paying off the credit card debt. I remember paying off the home equity line that I had defaulted on. I remember when my retirement savings got to $100,000. It wasn't like a day. It wasn't
Right. It happened over time, gradually.
Yeah.
And now, just give us a snapshot of where you are now, since you've been so open anyway. Where are you now? You've already told us you have a $1.2 million mortgage, so clearly you're back on track when it comes to a lot, and you're probably
clearly I have a high mortgage payment. Yeah,
you're like, that's all that means is there's a high mortgage payment.
No. So I live in San Jose. We have a nice house. It's a nice house, but it's 1.75 or something like that.
Yeah.
And I run a wealth management firm, and it's a recurring revenue model, easily sellable business. It's probably worth 1.5 million at this point. My husband and I probably have a joint net worth of about $4.5 million. I got married in 2013. And at this point, last year we had $2 million of personal income. So yeah, things look a lot different.
You, Hillary.
Yeah.
Doing it. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so you did an episode with Amy Mewborn, and it was about steps to leave your 9-to-5 job. But this is so important to our audience because we are talking all the time about what is a side hustle and how can you be building this on the side, and then when is it time to jump ship and do it full time, and how do you create that? How do you build an infrastructure over time with your side hustle so that you can eventually leave your 9-to-5? What do you have to say about that?
So I don't want someone who loves photography to go into business as a solo photographer. I want that person to create a system that eventually other people can manifest for them. So let me give you an example. In my business, when I went out on my own in 2014, I was the only advisor on the team. So if I went on vacation, there was no one to answer the emails, talk to new prospective clients. Now my business isn't that intense or dramatic, right? There are no emergencies typically in my business. So I was able to go out on vacation, but now I have an associate advisor on my team, and that person is learning how I do business, and my clients experience her as an extension of me. Now I'm free to not be in the office. So I like to envision businesses as systems. I'm sure you've read The Entrepreneurial Myth.
No. Tell me about it.
He talks about the difference between the tactician and the entrepreneur, and the photographer example is a perfect one. So people go out into business with great intentions because they have this thing that they do that they love, and what they've done is they've taken their hobby and made it their work, and that's all fine and good, except the next thing they discover is that unless they're doing it, they can't make money. If they're the only one offering the service in their business, now they're sort of stuck, and they've sort of kind of traded one evil for another. So So that's the E-Myth. I made my employees read that book.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense to me. So creating systems. So let's keep going with that. So what else? What else would you say to unpack? How do you eventually leave your 9-to-5 to go do the thing you really want to do? One thing you're saying is create a system.
Yeah, envision it in the beginning. Certainly you need to start by taking money. So, probably don't quit your day job in the beginning. Probably start in the evenings and the weekends. And you want to be going and getting paid for what you're doing, whatever it is that you, let's say it's personal styling, right? You want to be on the weekends working with clients and figuring out what people want and refining your service so that it becomes easier and easier to get paid for what you want to do. And then, you can kind of figure out how much money you need in the bank and, I'm always focused on kind of the financial aspect of things, but start lean. Maybe your employer will let you go half time, right? I often see like posts online and people say, I just quit my day job, right? And everyone clicks like, and I think, well, I hope you're going to be okay.
Yeah, exactly.
And for those of you who hate your day job, and I know you can sort of rally behind people who make the leap, but I encourage you to think of it as a slow transition out.
Yeah. And when do you think you're ready to go? What do you think you should have in the bank? Or what might be a good rule of thumb, like 6 months of what you need to live on in order to go ahead? Or what do you think?
Well, that's the rule of thumb when you have a job. I might say a year.
Okay.
Or just the ability to do that. Like maybe your home equity line could count as part of that. It depends on what pieces are present in that individual's life.
And as far as, I want to go back to the first thing you said, because we didn't exactly connect the dots, even though it's such an important point that you made. If you're the photographer and you're saying, don't become the photographer who's going to quit their job only to have to be the one shooting every single shoot, how do you create this system? What do you mean by that? I know exactly what you mean by that because in my business, there's lots of different people who work with me. I have a nice sized team. So I have people who work with me on the podcast, and I have people who work with me in my music business, and I have people who work with me on writing my book, and I have people who work with me to help me teach these online classes that I do. And so I don't need to be the only person to handle every single step of the business. And that makes a lot of sense to me, what you're saying. And everything is very scalable in that way, right? Because there is a system to it, and some of it is automated, and some of it is just on different people's shoulders, so that we've delegated things. But if I had never heard that, how can you connect the dots? What does that look like? What do you mean then about the photographer? Give me that as an example. So if I'm not going to be the photographer who shoots every wedding, what should it look like?
Well, let me use a cake pop business as an example.
Ooh, okay.
So you're making cake pops and you want to have a particular thing that people fall in love with about your cake pops, whether it's the decor or the color of the stick or the shape of the cake. You want a signature thing to be your thing. And once you figure out what that is, you can systematize it. And what I mean is document how to make them. Right? How to market them. How are you getting people into your shop? What's your advertising system? What works better? What have you learned doesn't work? And then start to bring in team members. Now, look, you've got to be making good money, right? You're not going to leave your job if cake pops isn't a profitable opportunity. So now you've got a little bit of excess income and you can afford to bring someone in part-time at first, someone who wants to learn the business. And now you can teach them your systems and begin to delegate parts of the work that you do. And maybe you've made so much money in cake pops, you can hire someone to do marketing for you, right? And that's someone who is going to be a contractor who's going to bring their specialized knowledge to your business. And so in that way, expanding your business. But the systems I'm talking about that are documentable are the things that you do over and over and over again in your business that make money. Ultimately, a business is nothing but a set of systems that consistently produce profit. And those systems can be documented.
I love it. It's working on your business more than you're working in it.
Yes.
It's 2018. It's a new year. What do you think, as we're wanting to take on new habits for this new year, what might be one thing that might be important to think about if we want to have a different result this year when it comes to money and to be in a more financially independent place this year?
The one thing I would recommend to everyone is that you automate your finances. The core of all financial success is spending less than you make. And you've got to know how much you spend on overhead expenses each month to know everything, to know how much you need to save, to know how much else you can spend on discretionary things. So I teach that. There's an episode on my podcast called Automate Your Financial Freedom. You can check that out. But I've got plenty of resources, and I've got plenty of resources on my website about automating, and that's at hillaryhendershot.com.
And automating means when you figure out sort of like how much you can put in like your fun account, how much you can put in your account that you need to save for bills.
Exactly.
But just really going through things so that you have that information at your fingertips, and then it's all sort of like lined up for you. You're not guessing. You're not going through the month blind. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. So money comes into your ecosystem and it gets distributed automatically through a series of account transfers that you've previously set up. And the only thing you have to do, so literally your next car is getting saved for on an automatic basis every month.
Oh, I see.
And the only thing you have to do is not spend more than the money in your today's fun account in order to have the entire plan work. And that is when I talk to people, the most common thing people say to me is, I just wish someone would go into my bank accounts and tell me how much I can spend. Right. And so, because money is like messy. And if you put it all in one pool, and it sounds like you're having some of this go on in your life, but there's like this truism in life. A task takes as long as the time you give to it. We'll probably spend all the money in a bank account. Like things increase to take up the size that we give them. So you've got to right size your spending and give your dollars each a job.
That's such a clear way to look at it, and that's such good advice. Okay, so everyone needs to write that down. And you said you did a whole episode on that, so we can find out more about it. What's the episode called?
It is episode 84 of Profit Boss Radio. It's called Automate Your Financial Freedom.
Perfect. Okay, yeah. So everyone needs to check that out. I know that one of the things that, you're famous for, and you do a lot of speaking, you talk about the 7 steps to wealth. I want to know if you can tell us what those 7 steps are.
Sure. So essentially, I think people get confused about what's behind wealth, that they forget that making money is a very different skill than saving and preserving it. So a lot of people have a lot of money coming in. They're confused, overwhelmed by it. Maybe they spend too much. We all know, if you don't know someone personally who made a fortune and lost it, you've heard stories of them, right?
Oh God, yeah. My husband, I just want to say, my husband says I spend money like MC Hammer. He goes, whatever you have, it's gone. And it's gone. He's like, you make a little money? He's like, yeah. He's like, Kath, you're doing great. That's not the problem. He's like, the problem is you do better and better. And you're like, let's go to the mall. I gotta buy some new shoes. And it's like, I don't buy diamonds and I don't buy Louis Vuitton bags. I don't. But it's like all the trips to Target that add up, or like you're online and you add 4 other items that you don't need. That's the problem. That's where I need to learn. So yeah. Like you said, there's a difference between earning money and then the other part about saving it.
Exactly. And so my assertion is that if you embody these principles, if you keep them alive and well in your life, that your financial success is a foregone conclusion. So let's talk about what they actually are.
Ooh,
so, okay, first step is decide. This is really the place. In my opinion, Cathy, most people never get through steps 1 and 2. So decide is the first step. When I find people, if you get real about what you're really up to in your financial life, for the vast majority of people are not following the basic principles of wealth. There's no magic. You have to spend less than you make, right? Or they're up to, for example, in the past life. The other thing we haven't talked about is how I thought if I had the emblems of wealth that people would think I was successful. So I had a convertible BMW that I couldn't afford to put gas in, right?
Oh, right.
So the first step is to really make that decision that in your financial life, what you're up to is building and preserving wealth. It really is about mindset, by the way. All the research we have says that kind of the difference between wealthy people and people who are broke is that wealthy people take responsibility for their results rather than being victims of the world and helpless. So, okay, second step is plan. You really need a wealth plan. You got to know the numbers. So I really like my system of automation. I teach it on my podcast, Profit Boss Radio, often because it's a bulletproof way to make sure that your money flows where you need it to go. So each dollar in your life should have a job, and you want to put it in the right account so that it goes there. I think a lot of people they start budgets and well-meaning, but it becomes this huge task to do. And if you get behind, you now have to go catch up for months and months and months of spending and tracking and categorizing before you can start again. And automating your finances is a total substitute for that. Planning also includes things like saving in your IRA, saving in your Roth, if you're a self-employed, saving in your SEP IRA, like that. Okay, third step is speak. You really have to master your internal programming about money. You have to deal with how you talk about money. So for you, and you've been honest in this conversation, so I'll just use you as an example. There's something that you're saying to yourself when you go to log in, talk about money or log into your bank, because you've described the stomach ache, the stress and anxiety. And it's that whatever that conversation is holding you back. I mean, imagine how it would feel to feel joyful and grateful when you think about money, right? That would be a different version of reality for you. So I have these little templates that I use for people to really look at what is your money operating system? Where did that come from? And what are the actions, behaviors, and conversations that are a result of it? And then once you've got it all on paper, you can say, okay, I'd like to change that.
This stuff is so important because what's normally happening, and this has to do with every area of our life, is like our thoughts are what dictate our actions. And so what we do is we just like have these behaviors and we get frustrated and we keep going in these same loops as opposed to stopping and going, wait, what's behind the action? And how do I then reprogram that so I take a different action? And now I have to actually commit to these different actions. And these are the conversations that are so uncomfortable, except that it's really working smarter than just going through the same thing over and over and over again without stopping and doing this really important reflective work. And I'm so glad that we're discussing it and you're helping us to change that conversation right now. So thank you for talking about it this way.
Yes. I mean, one of the things that I ask the people that I work with in my coaching programs to completely remove from their vocabulary is the phrase, I can't afford that. So, and that's just an example of how we really need to alter our dialogue about money. And I say to people, just, get real. If you're not going to buy it, just say, I'm not going to put that in my spending plan. And if you want it and the money isn't in your bank account right now, then at least give yourself the power of saying, empower yourself to say, well, I'm going to go figure out how to afford that. I'm going to go get the money. I'm going to figure out how to have that in my life. Right.
Yeah.
And that's just an example of things that people say that I think are knee jerk and that limit them financially.
Oh, well, there's a lot of things that people say, and I want to get to that later.
Yeah.
But I have a big one that comes to mind. Keep going.
Okay. The fourth step is ask. Okay. This is a conceptual step, but I want you to take on making bigger and bigger requests of the world. And this is going to look different based on where you are in life. For you and me, we might have specific and measurable business goals. For someone who's a salaried employee, maybe you want to say to someone who's in the upper divisions of your company, how can I double my income? How can I bring in more money? You want to also be someone who negotiates to your own benefit. So, you won't be successful every time, but making the effort to ask makes all the difference. One of the things I teach on my podcast is something that people don't realize. If you ask another human being for something, there's something like 70% more likely to give it to you if you simply give them a reason. So and there's a challenge that Tim Ferriss, I think, put out on his podcast that I loved. And he said, you should go into Starbucks and ask for a 15% discount on your coffee. And he said 90% of people won't even do this because we're afraid to ask. And so I told people on my podcast, go into Starbucks and say, can I have a 15% discount because X, right? Because it's my birthday,
oh my God,
because
that's so funny.
I'm saving money, right? Whatever that is. And more often than not, they give it to you.
Yep, I bet they do.
So the fifth step is earn, really taking inspired action to bring income and assets into your financial ecosystem. One thing I want to point out here is that some people get stuck in the thinking that the financial game is a zero-sum game. So if I pay you for something, you might think, I now don't have that money, right? So you're taking it from me. So there's guilt, especially for women as entrepreneurs and business owners. People get to feeling bad about charging money. And, when you've done a voluntary exchange, you've created value. If I pay you money, it's because I value what you're giving me more than those dollars. And so there's an infinite amount of money out there. So the sixth step is invest. You really do have to use, in my opinion, this is kind of what I do for a living, right? So use evidence-based methods to grow your wealth and compound your earnings. That one of the things we know about women is that we have a bunch of money in our savings accounts and we are responsible more and more for the financial day-to-day decisions of the family. But when you take a look at what our money is in, more often than not, it's in cash. And what that means is it's losing value over time. We're afraid of the stock market, and because we think we don't know what to do. We don't know how to, we don't trust ourselves to make decisions. But when you look at a woman, how she normally invests versus a man who's more, men tend to suffer from overconfidence in the area of stock market investing. That's documented. I didn't make that up. But men tend to buy and sell more, which turns out to be bad. Women, because we're afraid, will just buy whatever and hold on to it. And that turns out to be a better investing strategy, interestingly enough.
That's interesting.
And then the seventh step is protect. You have got to protect your wealth. You can't gamble with what you can't afford to lose. So things like life insurance, auto insurance, home and renter's insurance, an umbrella policy, also a revocable living trust. Think these estate planning techniques that sound sophisticated, but really truly anyone who owns a piece of real estate or has a child should have some kind of estate plan. I mean, for example, I always get these questions. Should I use my 401k to start a business? And I mean, inside this principle of wealth, the protect principle, I say, if you have to ask, the answer is probably no.
Yeah.
It's about honoring what you have, stewarding what you have, and all the while going out to create more. So those are the 7 steps to wealth.
Okay, well, that was amazing. Chock full of good things to think about and to do. I want to go to something else. You talked before, we mentioned it several times already. It's been sort of like this thread running through this whole discussion. We talked about those money blocks. And on your podcast, which is fantastic, Profit Boss, you've had a few different episodes. One was on money blocks, a whole episode. Another one was on rewiring your mind. And I want you to tell me right now a little bit more about that, because this is the first thing that you said you had to do. You said, I did 2 things. First, I had to change the way I thought about it. And then I had to change the way I actually handled money. How do we rewire these beliefs? What are these big ones? I'll tell you one that I hear all the time. Money is the root of all evil. I hate money.
That is actually on my list of most popular money operating systems.
Yeah. And you know what? I had a sit down conversation with someone, I won't say who, and he almost had tears in his eyes. And he's like, he's a grown adult guy. And we were having a conversation. I was trying to give him some insight on an idea I had for him and how he could grow his business. And he kept coming up with all this pushback and all this resistance. And finally, he kind of comes clean and he has this moment. And he says to me, when I was growing up, my dad is a social worker and he has a bleeding heart. And my mom also, always volunteers, and we never had enough. And my parents, because they're such do-gooders, there was always this, there was so much stress in the house around money, but they also had a lot of resistance to people who had money. And I grew up thinking that people with money were not really very nice, and money itself was kind of evil, and it made people evil. And he said, I have something inside me where I don't really want to charge people for things. I don't really want to have a lot. I feel like I have to justify it if I do have or if I do charge. And I'm like, oh my God, dude. You're swimming in all this negativity. This is why you're barely making ends meet. He hated money. He felt like money was had equal signs to being a terrible person. If you have money, you're not nice. You clearly don't care about other people. You can't be a good person. And money causes all the stress. Money is the reason that people have issues. So therefore, I don't like money. How do you rewire your brain, Hillary? How do you get over that money block?
Okay. So this money operating system, that strongly held belief, is so pernicious and so destructive and so incorrect. And that really is the good news for people who are stuck with this one, because money is a blank slate. Money has no meaning. Money is just a conversation. Cash isn't money. Money is 100% conceptual. Money doesn't even exist. We made it up And now we're all crazy about it, right? So
that is true. That's so weird when you say it, though. It's like, yeah, it's paper that we decided had
but no,
value.
That's not paper. You can't buy a cocktail with a $5 bill on a commercial airliner. They don't take cash. Cash is not money.
Yeah.
Right? Cash is something that represents money, and is used less and less, right? And your credit card doesn't have money in it. Money doesn't exist in reality. You can never see, touch, taste, or feel money. And that just blows people away, right? And we've made up all these superstitions about money, and money is evil is a particularly bad one. So I don't usually do this in interviews, but I'm actually going to read a quote, and you probably have heard it before, and I am answering your question. And this quote it's usually attributed to a man named Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. But I know from researching it.
Say that again 10 times. Say it again. Keep going.
But he actually didn't say it, but I'm going to read it. So we don't know who said it, but I'm going to read it. Until one is committed, there is hesitancy, the chance to draw back, always ineffectiveness. Concerning all acts of initiative and creation, there is one elementary truth, the ignorance of which kills countless ideas and splendid plans, that the moment one definitely commits oneself, then providence moves too. All sorts of things occur to help one that would never otherwise have occurred. A whole stream of events issues from the decision, raising in one's favor all manner of unforeseen incidents, meetings, and material assistance which no man could have dreamed would have come his way. Now, that is the reason the first principle of wealth is to decide. Most people you meet who are suffering financially have not decided, have not committed, right? And so they can't see the steps that they need to take in order to get out of it. You're asking me, how do people transform their financial beliefs, their money operating systems? You have to decide first. I can't help you until you do, right? Because you won't see it. You sound like a woman who's had tremendous success in her life. And I imagine each of those endeavors that you've taken on, the songwriting and then the podcast, and I bet there's a host of wins that I don't even know about. But there's a moment you decide that you're going to do it, or at least that you're going to research it. And then all of a sudden you start seeing things about, in this case, podcasting everywhere. You see resources, you meet new podcasters, you find new podcasts that you love, right? Because you're looking for them. It's now in your view. And this is the universe lining up to give you what you say you want. We live in a friendly universe. The universe wants you to be happy, fulfilled, and have everything you want, right? So beautiful. Your friend, it sounds like he has just discovered this wiring problem, right? That he hasn't been looking for financial success. He hasn't been playing the game called, I'm going to be financially independent one day. He's not playing that game. Right? He's playing a different game in his money life. And so that's where I would start with him in coaching. It is, what are you willing to admit you've been doing up to now? And what do you choose or declare that you're doing in the future?
It's amazing that you're saying this, because I never thought about it in such a clear way, but I am so committed. And my husband always says to me, he goes, you have the will of a small country. He goes, it scares the daylights out of me. He goes, because you get this look in your eye. He goes, when you're going to do something and then you just do anything and everything it takes to get to the finish line. You commit to the finish line no matter what.
Yes.
And I've met people in my life who either have that or they don't. And you are so right. I've never boiled it down to that. But I do feel like when you commit, it's sort of saying to yourself, what I have is the certainty of the commitment, which means I don't know a lot of the unknowns. But what I do know is I will commit until I get there. I will figure it out. I will be resourceful and I will get to the end no matter what. And then you're right. You commit with all this enthusiasm and all this passion and all this dedication, and you start taking action, massive action, and doors start to open that you would never have thought before, and opportunities click, and then your consistency and your commitment continues to catch up with all these opportunities, and you get better and better at what you're doing, and absolutely, there you go. And there is something about the commitment, and I think everyone can do that. That's the thing, and there aren't any excuses, because if it's really that, then that's something we all have a lot more control over than we think.
Exactly.
So that's really powerful.
That's the good news.
That is really good news.
Yeah.
And you've definitely done that in your life. And that's an incredible insight to really boil it down to that commitment and that decision to commit.
Yes. And when I meet people talk to me about their money a lot, right? And I can get pretty clear whether they've decided or not. And if someone's in a place where they haven't decided, this is why people get so frustrated. Oh, how come I'm interested in building our retirement savings, but my husband, I can't get him on board. He won't deal with the money. He won't help. He won't support. He won't partner with me. If someone isn't in that place, there's nothing you can do. There's absolutely nothing you can do because he has to decide, right? And so when I can tell that someone hasn't decided, I kind of back away. First of all, I never coach. I never offer them any advice because they're not asking for it.
They're not ready yet. Can you finish the sentence? Decide to what?
So decide to be financially healthy, decide to achieve financial freedom, decide to save $3 million, decide to get out of debt, decide to earn $250,000 a year, whatever that is for you.
And there's something there's a lot of shame that comes up. I remember seeing an episode of Oprah years ago, and she had a stage full of women, and she had people have this, they had a little marker and a whiteboard, and she had each of them write on this little whiteboard that had a personal size one. She said, I want you to write how much money you would love to earn. And each person wrote a number. And then she said, now I want you to turn it and show it to the audience, but the people sitting next to you can't see it. But just the audience will see each of your number, whatever you wrote down. Somebody wrote $75,000. Somebody wrote $200,000. Somebody wrote $1 million. And then she talked to each person one by one. And she said, do you realize that you wrote $75,000? Why didn't you write more? And the person would have tears in their eyes. Well, I don't think $75,000 would be plenty. It's enough. I don't need more than that, but why not? Well, I can't conceptualize making more than that. And that has to do a lot with self-worth and shame and what you feel money really signifies. And here's Oprah saying to these women, she goes, I make a gajillion dollars. And she goes, you know how I look at it? She goes, it's not even mine. I look at it every day. She goes, my spiritual practice is I ask the world, I ask God, I ask the universe to help me be in service. And then whatever money comes into my hands, it's I get a chance to reallocate that to other people, to other projects. So I don't have to have shame around it. Because to me, it's all this flow. It comes in here and then I put it back out and I just get to sort of help guide this money that's not even really mine. And I don't have any problems around, receiving it. But it was fascinating. It's fascinating how people limit, and they say to me all the time, well, I'll say to them, how much money do you want to make? And right away, there's this tension, and they go, well, look, I don't need that much. I'm not asking for that much. I just want to make $100,000. I just want to make how about not 6 million?
Right, exactly.
6 million. I don't need that. It's what's wrong with it? Is it bad? Is it spoiled? Does it make you a bad person? How come you wouldn't want $6 million? Because that's a really helpful amount of money. It's more helpful than $200,000. And if what you're saying is true, then it's the same kind of work mentally that you have to cross in terms of a threshold in your mind. And then maybe the results are going to be the same results. So it's about deciding first which one. So why not pick the bigger one? What is it about it? Why so much shame around making a lot of money? Why?
So each of those people who wrote on the whiteboards that Oprah was interviewing comes from a different background. So there's not one answer to that question. But we as a society, in the same way we agree that thinner is better than fatter, we've agreed that richer is more valuable than poor, right? So if you have money, there's value there. If you're poor, there is a shame about that. But conversely, there's also this strongly held belief that poor goes with noble, goes with virtuous. The starving artist, right? We revere starving artists.
Oh, I can't take it. Yeah, it's true.
It's terrible, right? I don't want artists to starve.
No, 'cause it's not helpful. Of course, nobody should be starving. And somebody set me straight recently, and somebody said to me, you realize if you have more money, you can be more generous, right? And I was like, well, that's not true. There's poor people who are generous. She's like, yeah. There's poor people who are generous. That's absolutely true. That'd be ridiculous to say that they're not. But she goes, when you think about it, if you don't have to worry about how you're going to make $12 today just to get lunch, you have more energy to spend on helping somebody else or on putting your time into something that you really want to do, which hopefully is going to make you a happier you, which is going to give more to the world. And then you might be making more money, which means you might be able to help your sister or help your cousin or help somebody else start a business. And think of all the buildings in the world that have names on them because people started a community center or people dedicated a park to a town. She goes, while it's true that poor people are generous, it's also true that rich people are really generous. And to say that rich people are mean, she goes, that makes no sense, because you can definitely be generous when you don't have to suffer through the day just to pay the bills. And it's something we really don't talk about, do we? I mean, there's such a stigma on it. And people get, people make fun of people who have money. They'll talk about them. They'll become the subject of conversation. Oh, did you see so-and-so? She's such a this, she's such a that. It's like, that's
that doesn't
great.
happen in my world. So I know that it happens out there, but my clients are millionaires and multimillionaires, and I definitely don't.
And they're probably mostly very nice people. And a lot of the really wealthy people I know actually are very understated, and they don't have to show it off. They just live a nice life. Now, let's go back to something that's on point for this audience. And it has to do somewhat with what we just talked about in terms of what you believe you deserve and what you can charge. You did a whole episode on freelancers and charging for your work. Let's talk about that, because that's something that comes up for my listeners. How do you go about putting a price on your art, putting a price on your yoga teaching, putting a price on the service or on the thing that you create? That isn't an easy thing to do. It's difficult when it gets to that part of the conversation. You have to charge. Tell us what some of your insight is around that.
Let me start by just saying that there are some of you listening who right now can't imagine feeling good about stating a 4 or 5 or 6 figure price. And I just promise you can get there it takes time, and how much time it takes is different for each person, but you can get there. I recommend that you start by figuring out how much money you need to make to live happily. So you and your partner, or just you alone, can look at your family finances, your cost of living, and you can determine, okay, I may be making $150,000 a year in my job, but really I can make $100,000, this year, and we'll pay our bills, and we'll still be, I won't be going to credit card debt. And so I'm setting my income minimum at $100,000. And now figure out how many of those things, those paintings or cake pops or framed photographs or Etsy jewelry pieces you can make, figure out how long it takes you to make those things, and then divide the $100,000 by 12 months and additionally 4 weeks, and figure out what you need to make in a week and in a day in order to have it work.
Smart. That's so easy. That makes sense.
Yeah.
That's simple.
Rather than trying to arbitrarily put some value on a thing that doesn't have value inside it. It's only creates value in the exchange. When you sell it to me and I say, Cathy, that's the most beautiful necklace I've ever seen, I would gladly pay $100 for that.
Yeah.
Right? It's made up.
It's really good. I feel like we've talked about so many important things, and this conversation has been chock full of it hits you in your solar plexus. I feel like that's when you know you're having a good conversation, when it gets you a little uncomfortable, and then actually there's a payoff, and I feel like I've had that feeling as we're talking. It's like, this gets uncomfortable because this is a topic that's difficult to, people say, don't talk about religion, don't talk about politics, don't talk about money, but these are important conversations to have. And I feel like you've done a lot to help us have more energy around it and to not be so overwhelmed by it. Is there anything else that you want to share as we're closing? Anything else, anything we didn't cover, any advice, anything you want to leave the listeners with for right now?
I want people to know that I firmly believe that anything is possible, and that no matter where you are right now financially, if you take on playing this game, you can evolve, transform, you can completely alter not only your experience of money, but your reality about money. It does take focus, but literally anything is possible. I could tell 10 or 15 stories of financial turnaround right now that would blow your mind. And, those stories can be yours. I feature them on my podcast, Profit Boss Radio. But my core message is just that we can do it. It's time for us to do this for ourselves. The government isn't going to help. Government doesn't have any money to give you. The government gets its money from you. So it's time that we take care of ourselves financially. That taking care of yourself isn't selfish. It's actually honoring and respecting and loving you. And that's my mission.
It's beautiful. And guys, you can find her at Profit Boss Radio. Great podcast. You can already tell Hillary's just so down to earth, and she's she's really a person who has so much that she wants to help you with, and she knows what she's talking about, and she cares, and she's cool. So I think it's like a great way to, like, it's like when you're going to take medicine, it's like, to have a zucchini muffin instead of eating the straight up cold zucchini. I feel like she can give you guys nutrition, but in a way that's palatable and fun and yummy and interesting. Well, Hillary, this was so great. I learned so much, and I really enjoyed the conversation tremendously. Thank you for being here. It's been a really generous hour. You've given us so much, and I'm sure people will be checking out your podcast, and I'm excited to talk to you more and just be buddies, and hopefully our paths will keep crossing.
Well, you are a fantastic podcaster, very articulate and great conversationalist. So thank you for having me.
Thanks, Hillary.
Popping back in here with a lottery update that's just showed up in my inbox, and I thought it was timely and very interesting. So many of you probably know that the Mega Millions jackpot as of today is over $1 billion for the first time. I think it's at a $1.6 billion. So people are rushing to the lottery ticket boxes to buy tickets. And I just received this data from moneywise.com. It says that your odds of winning the Mega Millions jackpot are 1 in 302 million. But not only that, Americans spend close to $73 billion on lottery tickets during a typical year, according to U.S. Census data. And this study by moneywise.com shows that if that money was invested in stocks instead, it has the potential to grow quickly and impressively by $26 billion within 2 years. For example, if Kentuckians had invested the $921 million they shelled out for lottery tickets in 2016, that pool of money would have grown to $1.3 billion by the end of 2017. So even though it might feel like just a few dollars at a time, over time, lottery spending really adds up. So if you're thinking of rushing down to buy a lottery ticket, maybe, just maybe, you should put that money to work for your future instead. If you enjoyed today's show and got value from it, please share it with a friend. Also, if you have money questions, I would love to hear from you. Just grab your mobile device and record yourself asking your question. Include your first name and the city you live in, and then ask away. Then email your voice message to media@hillaryhendershot.com. Then stay tuned to hear yourself on the podcast in an upcoming Ask Hillary episode. I care about you and your money, and I'd love to hear what you need from Profit Boss Radio to really make a difference in your wealth building today.